All right. My horror movie journey started when I was 7 years old. And it was with the previous family before I was introduced to the family that I have now. And I remember um, two boys that I hung out with that they became my brothers. Um, And I remember we were down in the basement and we were playing with the magic knives, the ones that you could stab each other with the retractable blades. And um, and I remember we had the TV on, and so, once again, we didn't think anything of it. We were just goofing around, being kids. And we heard like this sinister music or something that, definitely caught our eyes. And we saw the title of the movie, and it said Stephen King's Creep Show. And I can't speak for my other two brothers, but I can tell you that fascinated me. And I remember the three of us sat down and watched it, and pretty much the rest is history. Um, and then when I was introduced to the family that I have now, um, I had a neighbor that lived catty corner to where I lived. And I would go over there, and him and I became really good friends. Um, and that was when the fascination for horror movies became even deeper. And when let's see, I probably was maybe 10 or 11, possibly 12 at the time, but I would go over there and he would introduce me to Chopping Mall and um, some of the Friday the 13th, Halloween, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Um, I want to say I watched Nightmare on Elm Street over there as well, and I believe I was also introduced to Jack Frost, the killer snowman, and some people are thinking that's pretty fucked up, you know, especially at 10 or 11 to see all these pretty graphic horror movies, right? Well, it didn't scare me. None of them scared me. It fascinated me. Um, I remember like during one of the Friday the 13th, he was showing me. And I just asked him because I was fascinated. I was like, wait a minute. Jason was there, and now he's fucking there. How the, how the fuck does that happen? because I didn't understand movie magic. I didn't understand any of that. I just knew that I could physically see that one minute he was there and the next minute he was there. You know, same thing with Halloween. It fascinated me how quick Michael could fucking move. He'd be outside the house and the next minute he'd be inside the house where the potential victims don't even know he's there. Um, and then as I got older, my brother had a fascination with my older brother had a fascination with horror movies as well. So quite a lot of times he would invite his group of friends over, and they would go down to our local video store. And for those who are not old enough to know what a video store is, I will tell you it was one of the raddest things to ever come. And it's a fucking shame that they don't exist anymore. Um, and so what they would do, they would go down there and they would look at some of the lowest star rating horror movies that they could find, because apparently they had a fascination with doing that. So, and I remember one of the ones that they would come back with that I sat down and watched with them was a movie called The Unnameable. And it was pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie, I think it was a half-star movie or maybe one and a half. I forget, but it was pretty fucking bad. But I have to give props on the creature. The special effects that they used to create the creature was fucking phenomenal. Now nowadays you'd think it was a pile of shit. Um, but then then my brother and his friends, they went through kind of like a weird phase of movies, and I cannot remember if these two movies that I'm going to name next were horror movies or not. Um, I just know that they were really, really fucking weird, and one of them I can't even explain because I barely remember. I just remember the title. But one of the ones that I was introduced to was a movie called Tetsuo, the Iron Man. And this movie was just fucking weird. I mean, really fucking weird. There would be this guy, and he would bend these metal rods and stick them in different parts of his body. And um, I believe the movie might have been black and white because I remember the blood that would pour out of the guy's legs and arms and things like that was black. But that was one of the movies that he introduced me to. Um, the other one was a movie called Quadrophenia, and that's one that I only remember the name. I can't even tell you what the fuck the movie was about, or whether it was even a horror movie. Um, but my first taste of disturbance when it came to a horror movie was when uh, him and his friends sat down and watched Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. That movie was fucked up. And I remember it was difficult for me to sit through it. Now I did. Um, but it left a feeling in my head and in my stomach so much that to this day I've never gone back and to this day I've never gone back and watched that movie again. Now, I was glad to have seen what some people consider one of the greatest horror masterpieces. Um, which I do tend to agree, but that movie is not for everyone. Not for everyone. Um, and then my brother introduced me to um, Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. And those movies, I have to say, I absolutely loved. Had a blast with them. Um, although that particular scene in the first one was a little. I didn't really need to see that scene. And if you have seen The Evil Dead, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, however, most of the movie I found pretty hilarious. As well as the second one. The second one was just a fucking riot of laughter. Um, and then the big kahuna. And you know exactly who I'm talking about because he's on my fucking shirt. My brother and his friends introduced me to what has become my all-time favorite horror movie of all time. I just said that twice, didn't I? Fuck it. Anyway, and that is Hellraiser. And I remember watching that for the very first time. And it was mind blowing. It was something that I had never experienced in a horror movie. You know, I had seen blood and guts and gore, but not to that extent. Um, and then I remember seeing the Cenobites for the very first time, and I was like, these people are fucking badass. But you better know what the fuck you're getting yourself into. Because if not, they will tear your soul apart. They don't give a fuck. If you play with that box. Um, However, the part one of the fascinating parts of that movie was the transformation of Frank coming up from the basement floorboards and coming back to life. But yeah, then I was introduced to Hellraiser 2, Hellbound. And once again, it was a type of horror that I had never experienced before until Hellraiser. And there's just something about the Cenobites that fascinate me. And I think it's the look of them, and it's also the look of Pinhead. He is just a bad motherfucker. You know? He's badass. I mean, yes, he's disturbing, but that's the point. You know? You wouldn't want a demon style creature to be happy, happy, joy, joy, and all that nonsense, you know. So, but yeah, and just over the years, as I've gotten older, um, I've seen more and more horror movies. Um, and one to this day that sticks in my mind that I think is a brilliant piece of art is Robert Englund as the Phantom of the Opera. If you have not seen that, find a way to see it. I don't I don't know if it's on any of the streaming services. Um, but it is just brilliant. Um, but yeah, then another thing that um, another type of horror that I was introduced to was Um, when I was younger, my parents took me into the silent film and play of The Phantom of the Opera. And I had no idea what the fuck a silent film was. And I just remember that there was a giant screen and it was playing the movie and the words were written across the screen. And I remember there was a stage actor that came down from a set of steps on the stage, and there was a giant, I want to say, organ, and he came down as the Phantom and started playing the Phantom of the Opera theme music. And I leaned over to my mom and I was like, what am I watching? And she's like, this is called a silent film. This is how films did it back when I was growing up. And when you're now dad was growing up as well. And after she explained that, that was all the explanation I needed. I was glued to the fucking screen for the entire show. I was glued to the Phantom playing the Phantom of the Opera music. And that fascinated me. And so I've dabbled in some black and white movies. However, most of them are not silent, like the Universal monster movies. But the one silent film that I absolutely fell in love with was W.F. Murnau's Nosferatu. I believe it's Murnau. And if you have not seen that, and you're fascinated by a black and white silent film, go check that shit out. It is phenomenal. It amazes me how an actor can do a hand gesture or move their hands or tilt their head or make eye contact or just move in a way that gives you an uneasy, vulnerable, creepy feeling, and they don't even have to say a fucking thing. And that's fascinating. And based on the horror movie journey that I've experienced, and I continue to experience today, that is why I love horror movies.